Some people have a knack for being in the right place at the right time. John McClane has a knack for being in the wrong place at the right time.
McClane?
Don't try to stop me, Al.
I was just gonna wish you luck.
The reason why we made Die Hard, we already had a relationship with 20th Century Fox, and we were talking to them about the various licenses they had and what projects we could work on. And we came to the conclusion that Die Hard was something that really excited us. We're huge fans of the film. The game already existed on previous Die Hard films that did very well, but we just love the film, and we think even though it's a 14-year-old franchise potentially, it's something that people always know. They still use the one-liners from the film. Everybody remembers the films. It's a classic. If you are a hardcore gamer, there's enough in here that's new controls, new scenarios, new puzzles, new ideas of gameplay that will keep you entertained and give you something different from a lot of games out there.
We wanted to have a very strong lead character for the player to relate to and associate with. And we were working with our publisher, who's 20th Century Fox, and they obviously had numerous licenses available to them. And one of them was Die Hard. Now, Die Hard is, to everyone, one of the all-time classic action films. It's one of the films that, even though it came out in '88, it's 20 years old or 15 years old, it actually hasn't dated. If you look at it tomorrow, it's got everything you want from an action film. Great set pieces, fantastic tension, brilliant dialogue, but also it's got one of the all-time classic heroes or anti-heroes in John McClane. And that was a very exciting character for us to try and translate into a video game. You get an attitude, you get someone who you can relate to. He's not Superman. He's not some character who can take out an army on his own. He's an everyday man who's a bit grumpy, a bit pissed off, which again makes him more human, but also is very determined. And the challenge for us was to translate that into a video game. When we began making Die Hard Vendetta, the first thing we concentrated on was the story that the game was going to tell. It was very important to us to do the other films justice. As you get a certain expectation when you're told you're going to be playing a Die Hard game or you're going to see a Die Hard film. And we wanted to make sure that we lived up to those expectations. So we started focusing on what the story for Die Hard Vendetta would be. With the Die Hard films, there are certain things you'll get with them with regards to snappy dialogue, big set pieces, plot twists, and we wanted to incorporate all of these things into the story for the game. With that, we wanted to allow the player to be able to do things that you hadn't been able to do before. First and foremost, you run around and you shoot things as is standard, but with the character of John McClane, we realised that a lot of what he does is creeping around. It's not just going in guns blazing. One of the first things we realised was we wanted to put in a stealth mode, which allowed the player to creep up on terrorist mercenaries. So we introduced the stealth mechanic, which meant that you'd move around slowly, but you had a better chance of avoiding confrontation as opposed to every time coming in and having to shoot your way out of problems. Another thing that we wanted to do with the player was allow them the ability to interact with the world more than had been achieved before. And either that would be through talking to other characters in the world, in the game world. One of the mechanics we've got is physically grabbing another person in the world. And that opened up a whole area of gameplay mechanics that hadn't been tapped into before. If he grabs the correct person, he can disarm a whole group of mercenaries. By taking out the commander, there's a chain of hierarchy, chain of command, and his henchmen will stand down. So this, coupled with the stealth aspect of the game, meant that the player had an alternative approach to dealing with all of these situations. We wanted to allow the player to have more flexibility in what they chose to do. One aspect of that was allowing the player to jump around as opposed to constantly being tied to the ground. One of the mechanics problems that you have with that is if you're jumping, you don't want to constantly having to look at your feet and see where the edge is before you perform a jump, because that's actually very frustrating for the player. So what we did was we came up with the mechanic of an auto jump, where if you ran at an edge, McClane would automatically leap. You want to keep the game flowing for the player, and the enjoyment comes out of making the jump as opposed to being in the right place to perform the jump. So again, it freed up the player to perform new actions in first person. One of the benefits of working in video games is we can actually create and model things that you can't really do in real life. Or if you were to do them in real life, it would cost millions and millions of pounds. So for instance, what you expect from the Die Hard film is large explosions, buildings being destroyed. We had a lot of fun in being able to do that because we could create these set pieces of mass destruction at a fraction of the cost to actually doing them in real life. And what is great for the player's point of view is they can cause this destruction, but they don't have to pay for it.